done any modelling on the assets that CEFC or loans that it would have to be written off if the REC price crashed as a result of the government's, if the government changed the renewable energy target?
Senator, we're not able to forecast the impact or the government policy in relation to REP. That we'll have to wait until such time. So it is a matter of speculation as to the likely impact. However, we do risk assess our transactions, and we're comfortable at this stage that our transactions, from our perspective as a lender, will perform. Equity investors may find it a different story.
Yes, so, but is it fair to say that if the renewable energy target is significantly changed, then there is a risk that some of the assets will have to be written off?
If there's a hypothetical question here, I think, Chair, I would have thought, which goes beyond saying...
I think Mr Yates actually addressed the hypothetical nature of it in his answer. So,
and I think that Mr Yates was actually being extremely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Okay, all right. I want to go back to where we started with this, and I want to thank you for providing a state-by-state breakdown following the last estimates. It was very helpful, and I acknowledge that you've just indicated that you'll do that again. But can we make sure that that's both for pipeline and existing portfolios? I wasn't sure whether that's exactly what you'd asked for, but...
It is. We actually have it for both, Senator, for the pipeline and the portfolio now.
Thank you. That's. I just want to make sure we've got that. Now, one of the criticisms that you often hear made of the CEFC, and we've had a bit of it here today, is that you only fund technologies that are already proven, and that and the inference there is that you crowd out existing lending institutions. So I wonder if you could just outline to the committee some of the technologies or projects that you have financed, which are essentially the first of their kind in Australia.
I'll do that in 1 second, but I can actually have the answers, if I may, to your question in relation to our portfolio in terms of breakup of technology, and it actually helps answer that question. So it's 26% wind, 14% cogen, 11% solar PV, 11% distributed generation, 11% is air conditioning, 8% lighting, 6% solar thermal, 4% bioenergy, 3% industrial processes, 3% refrigeration, and 3% in the ocean wave sector. So quite a diverse portfolio. Wave technology, wave energy. In terms of areas that are new, I think some of the transactions, Senator, you'd be aware, is Sundrop Farms is really quite a world-leading example in sustainable agriculture, which is where the company will be using solar thermal energy to desalinate water and produce energy to provide all the water heating and cooling for a 22-hectare greenhouse to be built in South Australia. That transaction, once concluded, will be followed on, I believe, by a very large version, approximately 10 times that size now in the Middle East is what's expected to be next. The Carnegie Wave is quite unique, and Australia is undertaking some great work in the wave technology sector. In relation to biogas, which is in the agricultural sector, we are seeing major changes there, with farms right across the nation using their waste products for the purposes of producing effectively methane from waste products and using that to generate electricity. You know, I've seen it even at the council levels, Senator. I was up at Tumut Shire Council, where they have completely reduced their own council heating and cooling costs by using geothermal heating and cooling in the town of Tumut, and it's incredibly efficient. It's incredibly cheap. So right across, again, Australia, you're seeing people adopt modern technology, improving productivity, making a return for themselves, and we're making a return for the taxpayer, helping them.
And apart from the return to the taxpayer, can you give me an update on what you calculate to be the dollar cost of emission reduction from the work that you are doing?
Well, Senator, as we're often generally lending and receiving a return above the government's cost of funds, then the emissions reductions that are achieved are being achieved at a negative cost. Our estimate at the moment is approximately $2 and negative $2.40 a tonne is the cost of the emissions that we're saving through our activities.
So negative $2.40 a tonne, and what would be what's your estimate of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and how do you express that over what period for the projects you've already funded as opposed to what might be in the pipeline?
Well, when constructed, I think the projects at the moment are approximately 4 million tonnes is where we are at the moment, and we've looked forward and said, look, if we continue investing in the same type of transactions going forward until such time as we've invested $5 billion rather than the kind of $800 million, and those projects get built and they're similar to these, then it's probably realistic that we may be able to achieve 20 to 25% of the 20% reduction, the reduction, the 5% reduction that the government has actually targeted for the purposes of reducing emissions.
And doing that at a negative cost?
Doing that at a negative cost.
Yes. So in terms of cheapest abatement, we can't go much better than that. Well, there's no other way that I can see it at the moment that's cheaper than that. So I want to go now to the issue of the pipeline. I know you're going to provide us with the overall, but can you tell us how many projects are in your pipeline and the value of those projects? I think at the last estimates it was around 10.8 billion. What is it currently?
Well, there's approximately, I'm just looking at my notes, Senator, I'd say about 150 projects is what we indicated in March, and of course they're still, some will come in and some will go out. Those projects are seeking finance of about $4 billion, but they involve $11 billion worth of transactions. So as we co-finance transactions, we typically don't lend by ourselves. We try and attract a commercial partner, another lender to sit alongside us, because that's how we encourage the banks and other participants to come into the market. So we're expecting there to be about 11 billion of transactions for potentially maybe seeking 4 billion from the CEFC.
And are you able to expand for me on the nature of the two projects in the pipeline for Tasmania? I understand they're valued at something like 295 million.
I actually don't have the details of those with me, Senator, but I will take that question on notice.
Okay. And the timeframes around those two, I'd be interested in details. Just back to this question about the level of risk that the CEFC takes on in terms of its projects, notwithstanding it's judged not only by the financial return but also by the greenhouse gas emissions and contribution to climate action. But is it true, and are you finding that the uncertainty created by the government's policy framework means that you are being approached to fund projects that in other circumstances, if there was more certainty, they might be able to access funding elsewhere more readily?
Senator, I think in any area of the economy, when there is policy uncertainty, all areas withdraw from, and it is clear that that there is a greater nervousness amongst both equity and debt participants at the moment in this sector, like there would be in any other sector if it were subject to a major policy review.
Okay, so given that level of uncertainty, can you tell me, since you have started, are the commercial banks more likely to invest now in clean technology deployment than they were, or is it still regarded in the traditional financial institutions as too much of a risky area, and if the CEFC wasn't there, they wouldn't be investing? So that brokering role, how significant is it, or have we overcome the uncertainty by the performance that you've been able to demonstrate to date?
Senator, the brokering role is still critical. We're in a process of transition. We don't have the major banks with departments that specialise in the areas that we lend to. If the market was to grow a bit more, then our role would be less. But commercial institutions generally require there to be proven examples of something working before they will participate themselves. And we still have a fundamental role of encouraging them to participate alongside us, where we've done the analysis and we've spent the time trying to explain and working with them as to why the risk proposition is appropriate at this time. So our role will remain, I think, important for a period of time while we go through the transition and adopting energy efficiency projects and adopting more renewable energy become more widespread.
Okay, so I'll come to, but just on that, in the event you're not in the space, obviously the commercial lending institutions are still there. The government will have an emission reduction fund, which it says it'll be able to be bidded into for energy efficiency projects, for example. Can I take it from what you're saying that even if there is government money to be had, without a brokering agency, it's unlikely you'll get the commercial sector partnering into that?
No, I think, Senator, the commercial banks will continue to participate, but there are areas which are considerably more challenging, particularly for smaller borrowers and aggregating together smaller transactions, and any of the very new technologies. It'll just make the process more difficult and slow the whole process down. So the commercial banks are sensible organisations, but they, as you know, most of their lending is into commercial real estate and home loans. This is an area which is not an area of focus or significant focus at the moment.
So do you want to follow up?
Thank you. Yeah, exactly on this